What if everything you've been using to push through your drive, your discipline, your relentlessness need to achieve is actually the same thing burning you out? My guest today spent 12 years in tech consulting, became a President's Club sales rep and a pro bodybuilder at the same time, and still hit rock bottom in 2020 with addictions, a marriage on the edge, and burnout he couldn't grind his way out of. The thing nobody had told him yet, every single one of those patterns was his unmanaged ADHD trying to self medicate. Today is a story unlike one you've never heard. We're talking nervous system readiness, zone 2 cardio, and an ADHD non negotiable using exercise to literally rehearse high pressure moments, and why all the therapy and affirmations in the world don't work unless your body has practiced the emotions first.
Yeah, yeah, yes. Yo, yo, it's Alyece, say it right, no cap. ADHD CEO, yeah, we run this track. Systems that slap, brains built different. We make sales in our sleep, yeah, the hustle's efficient. This ain't fluff, nah, this is strategy raw for the ADHD. Minds breaking every old law. Hit subscribe, don't miss a single show. We're running on dopamine, let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Welcome back to the ADHD CEO. I'm super excited. It's been quite a while since I had a guest on. I'm really excited today to introduce you to Ian May. 12 years in tech consulting and software development, lifecycle selling to engineering leaders and CTOs. 2020 reached complete burnout, like a lot of us, I'm sure, after struggling with addictions and relating to unmanaged ADHD, which I'm really excited to dive in today with him and how we as listeners on the ADHD CEO can relate to that. But he regained clarity while still in a corporate job to do more in less time using everything he learned as a President's Club sales rep, a pro bodybuilder, and a faith driven leader. And I have to tell you, something on his website just really caught my eye. He and I chatted a little bit briefly before we are doing this recording. But, he talked about your ADHD brain is wired for more. And his website says for the highly successful but quietly suffering professionals. And I just really related to that. So I had to definitely have him on the podcast because I was quietly suffering for a very long time. So thank you for being with me today, Ian. I'm really excited to learn a little bit about you, your background, and what you mean when you say wired for more.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So, that whole conversation of wired for more to me really just has this idea of the highly successful but quietly suffering ADHD professional. They get this feeling of always feeling behind, always feeling like there are not enough trophies and accolades in the world that make them feel like they have finally succeeded. And it's so amazing because as my rap sheet pointed out, I have seen my fair share of quote success. I have quite a few trophies, are now collecting dust because I don't care anymore. You don't become a President's Club sales rep and pro bodybuilder at the same time because you're really secure with yourself. Right. It's a lot of need that you're trying to fill and a lot of praise that you're seeking to one, stand up in your underwear in front of a large crowd of people. So and
We
I
will talk a little bit more about for sure today. I love that. And I relate so much to that. And it's funny because in younger life, I mean, all the way back to childhood, it was looking for, I always just thought I was very competitive. And I am pretty competitive now. I am. I wish my kids had a little bit more of my competitive spirit. Whereas my husband's a little more like, if it happens, it happens. He's very much go with the flow. But for me, I was always like, and then in adulthood, when there's no more trophies, that are just given out for doing a sport, it's like, now what? And so, of course, I went after things in college and even into corporate. But when I got in corporate, I was looking for more, looking for more, looking for more, always. And to a point where I know that obviously I was on a path to burnout, but also some of my supervisors were like, you need to chill. Like, this is not your lane. Like, that's not, or that's not in the budget. That conference is not in the budget, or that training's not in the budget. So I just felt trapped a little bit when I got into corporate of I wanted more, but I felt like people were holding me back. And eventually I learned maybe I was really just always looking for something else, looking for chaos to avoid something. So I want to hear a little bit about, you did 12 years in tech consulting and 2020 burned out like a lot of people, of course. And I want to hear a little bit about your struggles, going through that time period. 12 years is a long time. And how you feel like, how did you discover your ADHD? I guess because it says unmanaged. So you went 12 years in that job unmanaged?
Yeah. So when I did not get a diagnosis until my late 20s. And even then, when I went to go get a diagnosis, here's the funny part. I thought I was masking and pretending to have ADHD symptoms in order to get performance enhancing drugs for focus. My
But you're
even
not the
reasoning. Yeah. So it
Yeah.
was funny because I thought I was playing the system to being like, oh, I'm ADHD, when in reality, it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, you actually are. But
Yeah.
I thought I was pretending to have it so I could get some focus medication. I ended up
Right.
abusing the medication very quickly and had to get rid of it. But it was probably 6 years later than that diagnosis that I finally actually realized, hey, a good majority of my addictive patterns, I mentioned struggling with alcohol in some of my stories. I talked about an addiction
Yeah.
to pornography and cybersex in some of my stories that caused my marriage to almost fail. Struggling with binge eating despite being a professional bodybuilder, like still struggling with binge eating despite those outward metrics for success. That all of those things inherently were, hey, you have a 3 to 4 times more likelihood of substance abuse disorder if you have ADHD. And working backwards from that, of realizing, hey, all of these patterns, all of these little addictions that I dabbled in were really me trying to self medicate. And then actually acknowledging that pretend diagnosis that I got was actually a real diagnosis. Then I did the processing, reprocessing that everybody kind of goes through of, hey, I'm going to go look at the entirety of my life and reprocess through this lens of ADHD. Like everybody does, right? Like that's the journey. And then when I talk to people, it's always like, hey, where are you at in that process? Because if you're just getting started, like not a coach, don't work with a coach. Go work with a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you need your hand to be held very gently, and mind you, I feel all of that so deeply, and I'm willing to be with you in that space, but coaching usually means that, like, "Hey, we're gonna go deliver on some strategies," and yeah, the
Yeah.
goal is to do it without burnout, but if you're in the middle of burnout, like, therapists are really adept at being able to handle that if you're doing it through the lens of ADHD. When I was going through my therapy, when I was coming out of addiction, I wasn't using the lens of ADHD, so I had a bunch of therapists who were like, "Hey, you just need some self-control. Hey, you just need to learn some focus." No shit,
Right.
Sherlock.
Yeah. Right.
But none of them
Right.
mentioned ADHD. And so what's funny is that they could say, "Hey, you need some self-control." And it's like, I measured everything I ate for 9 months straight. Hey, I cut out alcohol for 9 months before stepping on stage at 5% body fat. Do you think I don't know how to appear disciplined?
Exactly.
So, hey, help me understand what real self-control looks like. And it actually took me quite a few therapists that I went through and essentially outgrew because, hey, you're actually not helping me learn the fundamental skills of what is focus? What is self-control? I know that I need it. I can agree with you on that. But then what?
Right.
And so
Right.
the beautiful part of my brain, and maybe there's some undiagnosed autism in there too, is that like I'm very much so a systems person. Like there's when I say I'm gonna go become a pro bodybuilder, I'm gonna work backwards from there. And I was very systemic in that processing. But I did the same thing with focus. I did the same thing with my attention. I did the same thing with capturing your thoughts, which is some vernacular in my faith circles that I live in. I'm like, what does that even mean? Right. And there's a lot of spiritual abuse that can happen because you're like, hey, don't worry about anything. Give everything to God and seek first the kingdom. And hey, pray about everything. Well, perfect. I'm willing to. What does that even
Right.
mean? What does it mean to pray about this? What does it mean to capture thoughts? What does it mean to focus? And so I am like a child and keep asking this, like, yeah, but how? You just need to
Exactly.
focus. Yeah, but how?
Exactly.
So the
And
the
I'm
beautiful part of that journey was leaning into that and saying, "You know what? I'm gonna go first. I guess this is on me to figure this out." And unfortunately, I did the "you're smart, you can figure this out" approach.
yeah. How'd
Uh,
that work out?
it meant that it took me a couple more years longer than had I worked with somebody who had an ADHD-informed approach to therapy, to reprocessing, to mindfulness, to performance even.
Yeah. And so many of the things that I heard, like obviously being a high achiever, you have to have some sort of discipline. You have to have some sort of focus when you are hyper focused on that one thing or when that's the goal, right? You didn't get on stage as a bodybuilder without having discipline. So you acknowledged all of that. But I see so much in my clients, I see it in my kids, I see it in kids that we help through our nonprofit. Our neurodivergent brains are very much all or nothing always. It's all or nothing always. The same as it's either in our face and it's going to get done, or it is on the to do list and we're never going to get to it. And you kind of that's what makes us, I think, such high performers in a way, because when we're all in, we're all in. Whereas other people who are competing for, awards and a sales job or on stage, they're like, I'm going to go real hard. And ADHD is like, I'm going max. Like we're either in it or we're not in it, which obviously leads to burnout because we don't give ourselves that flexibility of rest or grace at all very often. And the same with, like you said, addiction. You know, I've seen the statistics of how much more likely we are, and you shared one with us because I think we're all or nothing.
Yeah.
It's very often all or nothing. We don't know our own threshold sometimes, and so I love that you said that you had to go through multiple therapists to find the right one because looking at it at a lens of an ADHD lens, it changes everything. It really does. And I've talked a lot about this in my own story about, I was diagnosed before my middle child, Caden, was born, but it wasn't until he was diagnosed with autism that I really was like, okay, all or nothing. I'm going in, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to learn everything I can learn. And the more I learned about his autism to help him, because I do think a lot of times as parents, our kids always come first. The more I learned about him, the more I started to understand myself.
Yeah.
You said I'm kind of like a child when it's like, but how, but why, but how, but why. I found myself doing that when learning about autism and with the spectrum as a whole. A lot of symptoms are the same. A lot of the neurodivergency chemicals in our brains are the same. And so I just wanted to just say, like, I validate everything. I mean, not that you need it, but validate everything in your story because so many of us experience it, but we may not be willing to be open or loud about it. And
Yeah.
that is how change happens, is us being able to share even the struggles on podcast or social media or with a friend
Yeah.
at a coffee.
Well, at least
Well,
the funny thing is we never had a problem being loud. It's just that what are we gonna be loud about now? And so finally being loud about, "Hey, I'm struggling. In fact, like, I need to see who's in my corner." And there was plenty of people who were like, "Actually, I liked the overstimulated Ian. Hey, you
yeah.
know what? He was pretty intense, kind of bad shit, but I also liked him. I genuinely liked being around him." And it's like, I can't be that person all the time. Culturally, I think the reason why people with ADHD go through or have such a higher likelihood of burnout is because culturally we actually don't know how to rest. We
No,
treat
agreed.
rest as still more stimulation. You sit and you watch football and you drink and you binge Netflix. Like, that's rest according to modern culture. And for us, rest is only the things that increase our dopamine receptors, right? Increase our sensitivity to dopamine. And the problem is culturally, what you do to rest is stimulate more dopamine. So, yeah, of course we're burnt out. Of course our nervous
Exactly.
systems are dysregulated. Of course we're more exhausted.
Oh,
But you add that high achiever. And I actually had a CEO call this out. One of my first startup jobs that I ever had, he said, "Ian, you're an insecure overachiever, and that is exactly why we." And at first,
okay.
this was during happy hour, so it was just kind of like, "Okay, how much do I owe you for for for
Yeah.
the therapy session?" And I didn't know if I should feel bitter, manipulated, or actually felt pretty seen. That, hey, this is also somebody who he's a CEO of a tech company. It's worth however many millions. It was acquired by Microsoft for $500 million. He ended up
Nice.
going on to become the CEO of GitHub for an interim period of time. Like, highly successful person,
Yeah.
and he's able to speak into that. And it was only until a decade later that I recognized of. Every time
Yeah.
I've ever sought an achievement or an accolade or some credential that work offers, and I'm the first one to get it done and pass the test and hyper
Mhm.
binge, all of the things.
A little bit because, I'm not 2 things that you said that I can relate to. One, my husband said, "I will always find chaos. If there's not chaos, I will create it." In a good way, not like a drama way, but, like, in a way of, like, if I finally have a clear day on my calendar, I'm like, "What can I start? What can I start up today? What am I gonna I'm gonna go paint the bath I'm gonna go renovate the whole bathroom today." My husband is somewhat my, like, "Let's take it down a notch," because obviously I don't have the best. I'm good at managing time, but I am not good at predicting it. So I cannot predict how long this project is going to take. And so, I like you said, you got the person who always kind of has the chaos. My husband is my sounding board of like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Maybe not. A lot of times he's very much, if anybody could do it, it's going to be you. But he does bring me back down to earth very often. But my mom used to always tell me that I was She called me the firster. I know that sounds crazy, but if there was an award or there was a trophy for something or some kind of accolade, I was going to be first. I was going to get it. I was going to do whatever it took to get there with integrity. Okay. But then I was bored. Once I got it, I was never the person that stayed there. I'm like, no, I'm bored. What's the next first? What's the next first? What's the next first? So I can relate to that. Like you said, when a company would put something, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna win it. I'm gonna, and I think it gave my brain something to focus on as a distraction from all of the obviously other things that maybe weren't as dopamine producing or as shiny, whatever. But my mom always called me the firster and she would tell people that, stop, because I mean, what if I don't get first? Now you've said it out loud and I didn't get it. Like, stop
Mm.
saying that. Let them be surprised. But I realized that very late into college was like, I don't really need to be first. I don't really even want this.
Well, I think what's interesting is that in our generation, the only way that they really determined if you had ADHD was there were behavioral things that were wrong. You weren't doing well in school. You weren't doing well in sports. And I think I was a class valedictorian in my high school. And so there's no way that I was going to get diagnosed when I was in high school, except every day during history class, I would go take a power nap in the nurse's office because history was boring. And I would tell the teacher, I'd made a deal with him. Hey, you don't want me to pass out in your class. That's disrespectful to you. I'm going to go to the nurse's office and I'm going to take a power nap. And I did every day. The only way that you get away with that, though, is by binging the studying to still ace the tests and doing
Yeah.
the thing. But I had written myself a letter when I was in the third grade, I believe, to my future self. So I had a teacher who's like, write yourself a letter to yourself when you're graduating. And I told myself, here are all of your goals. You're going to be a 4-year letterman in sports. You're going to be the captain of the football team. You're going to be a 4-year, or you're going to be a valedictorian. And I wrote all those things to myself in the third grade. Every single one of those things became true. And I figured out what was being as lazy as I was, what was the minimum viable requirements for me to achieve that. My school allowed you to have multiple valedictorians. We had 9. So I learned that you didn't have to take every AP class, every advanced placement class to get to become a valedictorian. So all the other valedictorians kind of hated me because they're like, you didn't take AP history, you didn't take AP English, you didn't do all that stuff. And I'm just over there kind of like, yeah, screw all of you guys. I did it and I did it and easier than you did. And here I
Right.
am speaking at my commencement. So enjoy.
Well, I will say, I think a lot in my childhood, because I definitely want to get into you know, going through obviously being on stage, but how you started to, understand some of this clearly and how, because you have a really big connection between how we treat our body and what we put into it and our exercise and all of those things. But I will say with valedictorian, that is kind of cheating. Okay. Because I was number 11 in my class. Okay, I was number 11 in my class, and while I was a high achiever and I, went after all the accolades and I had straight A's and honor roll, all the stuff, I did not make top 10, and my mom made sure I knew that. She was like, "You were number 11." I'm like, "I'm pretty sure it was a tie, okay? A tie." Like, but my mom would always say that, "It didn't make top 10, didn't make." I might have been a high achiever, but I had parents with very, very high expectations too, which is not a bad thing, kept me out of a lot of trouble, but
I'm willing
not.
to sit with you through your motherhood trauma while you work through the fact that I
And,
was a
my mother
valedictorian and you weren't.
yeah, she listens to my podcast. I don't think she does, but if she does, mom, you're amazing. I could not do life without my mother because 3 kids in 3 different directions, there needs to be 3 people. So it's me, my husband, and my mama. But with that being said, I wanna get into your, time on stage and how you started to make this connection and regain some of this clarity around being a bodybuilder and how you started to connect. Obviously, what we put in our body is important. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have the best diet. I will not lie to you that way. But I will tell you that I do notice a change in my energy levels personally because a lot of the research I have done is our energy is very much tied to our emotions. And so sometimes that's why, as ADHD people, we get one email that might have a tough question and it ruins the whole day, right? It's like brings the dopamine all the way down. And I've had a lot of questions with my students and people I've worked with, and even friends that have been diagnosed in adulthood that are like, you're the go to person. How do I increase that dopamine? Because there are just days I don't want to do anything. I don't want to move. The executive function is just not happening. And I always tell them movement gets the momentum started. I know how hard it is sometimes to just get out of the bed. I get that. But get out of the bed, go, go to the kitchen, start the coffee pot, just make a little bit of movement in your body. You can get around a 5K, but moving your body gets that energy flowing. And so even just small movement for me helps. And of course, when I exercise, I always feel better. So give us some background on your time as a bodybuilder and how it connects with your ADHD.
Yeah. So the difficulty is that something like exercise is important becomes so cliche that it gets overlooked. And diet is important, so cliche that it gets overlooked. And sleep
Right.
is important, gets is so cliche that it gets overlooked. So for me, what was interesting is that when I started reprocessing everything, I started looking at the times and places in which I was able to turn focus on with almost little to no problems.
Okay.
And so it was interesting is that while I was prepping for a bodybuilding competition, I was very regimented with what I was eating, I was very regimented with my exercise routine. And so I could actually look at that and work backwards from, hey, I know that the reason why I was trying to get on stage came from a place of vanity, came from a place of insecurity, came from a fear of needing to appear competent, and muscle and body composition was my
Right.
perception of and proxy to competence. But so my reasons for being there, okay, we can throw that out. The tools and tactics, though, let's actually pull from that. And so what's interesting about the ADHD experience, yes, we all are aware there's some dopamine dysregulation. The difficulty, though, is that exercise is actually a very significant way that we can release natural levels of dopamine that is more prolonged, that isn't a big spike and a big trough afterwards, right? And people have been using the words toxic dopamine. I don't love that language in general, but it's you can think of it like a siphon, right? It's such a big fast spike that it comes with a big trough. Whereas because of the fact that exercise is kind of like a near death experience, you are
Sometimes, yeah.
if you're doing it right, what's actually happening is that your body, because you created a near death experience, it's like, hey, how did we survive that? I need to make sure that I remember how we survived that. So I'm going to dump a bunch of dopamine to remember how we survived that near death experience, right?
Okay.
Dopamine
Okay.
gets released for safety as much as it does for pleasure. And
Agreed.
so what's interesting about that is that we actually see a much more steady, stable curve and elevation of dopamine, norepinephrine, and blood flow after exercise. So the difficulty of me saying, "Hey, exercise is good," it's like, no, exercise isn't optional.
Right.
And you don't need to go be a bodybuilder. Like, I don't need you to have triceps the size of Thor's like I cared to have.
That was out.
Yeah, it is optional, and especially if you're saying that a six pack of abs is necessary. Anybody who follows me will understand that joke. But so what's interesting is I'm not saying you need to be an Adonis. It's what is the smallest, most minimum effective dose of exercise that gets you that stimulus for natural
Right.
dopamine, norepinephrine, and blood flow. You can tell I've practiced saying those words in that order so many times because like it's rolling off the tongue right now, right? Caffeine's hitting, self medicating's working. So what's interesting though is that that's great. Yes, okay, we need to stimulate that part of things. Yes, movement is going to help with that. Like just start to move your body. The difficulty though is the burnout happens because we're constantly stimulating. And so now we can actually look at what other types of exercise can we do that actually leans more into increasing dopamine receptors. So now we're not actually looking at trying to increase our dopamine and stabilizing that curve for focus. It
Okay.
might actually be the types of exercise that increases our dopamine receptors, which means our sensitivity to dopamine is going up.
Right. Right.
And
Okay.
there's two different styles of exercise that I'm talking about. Like the one might very well be high intensity interval training, might be intense, all out, high intensity bodybuilding training, sets to failure, close to vomiting in your mouth, kind of psychotic crazy. Like that's really highly stimulating, but that can still lead to burnout. That can still lead to all of those things. So the opposite of that though, zone 2 cardio is what I look at. Is essentially there's a couple things happening. Is that one, zone 2 cardio is a particular heart rate range where you're not using any glycogen as fuel.
Okay.
And so what's interesting is that we find that elevated insulin and glycogen being used generates a ton of dopamine in those movements and those requirements of movements, whereas zone 2 cardio uses almost all fat as fuel. And so the
Nice.
beautiful part about doing zone 2 cardio for longer, prolonged periods of time is the fact that that type of exercise is increasing our sensitivity to dopamine. It's not optional.
So saying that it's increasing that and helping our receptors as a whole, how do you find that that helps them outside of the gym or outside of the cardio? They're not as sensitive to it. And so they're having dopamine all day long so that they're achieving more. later or
Yeah, so it means that you can do more with less. And so the whole idea is like we all with ADHD, we do have a certain threshold of dopamine that our brains need before we get
right.
enough dopamine that's around the amygdala, emotional parts of our brain, breaking that barrier into the frontal lobe, right? Like that's the issue of I can notice, hey, I'm in a complete task block. Like I am struggling to initiate on a task. I know that I need to downregulate my amygdala activity, upregulate dopamine, norepinephrine, and blood flow, right? That's an instantaneous moment in time that that's necessary. My sensitivity to dopamine, though, it makes it to where not as much needs to hit the frontal lobe for me to be able to take more effective action on. My nervous system has more dopamine receptors, which means it's using more of that dopamine that's in that nerve cell as it's passing along, or a neural synapse. And so that process, though, the difficulty is that's a weekly process. That's not an instantaneous moment in time. It's every week. I need to go spend 30 to 40 minutes in this zone two state multiple times a week,
Yeah,
potentially for a bit longer. And the beauty of that is like that's what actually helps me recover. Now the world would say that's not recovery. Recovery is supposed to happen on a couch in front of Netflix eating potato chips. That's real rest. When in reality it's no, actually go be bored for an hour. Go be in low stimulation for an hour in zone 2 cardio. And the beauty of that is you start to experience one a lot of emotions because I don't know if you've ever done long boring steady state cardio, but it's usually an emotional experience.
so I avoided a lot of cardio. I did do heavy weight for a very long time, which in conjunction with different intervals and things like that. I don't know. I had a guy at the gym that told me what to do, and I was doing really well, and I loved it. And it definitely was my like zone and clear my head until I had neck surgery. I had neck surgery in 2023, and I am still not able to lift anywhere near what I was able to lift previously, but I do enjoy my I don't know. I feel like I'm more focused in the gym than ever, and I do feel like it's restful for me. Even if I'm putting my body near, yeah, a life ending experience, it's I don't know, the lack of distractions and the lack of interruptions and the ability for me to just focus on one thing, me. And that's very hard as a mom,
Mm.
definitely very hard as a neurodivergent mom.
Yeah.
But maybe I need to look into this zone 2 cardio because I avoided cardio like the plague, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah. Well,
But
I
I am
just want to say
like
that I feel your heart in that fact of as a mother in general, it's hard to champion yourself.
it is.
And
It
I
is.
just want you to know that I feel your heart in that. And on top of that, being the mother of a neurodivergent, because your child's going through and has a lot of really big feelings. And when they're feeling everything to 100 out of 10 and you're overstimulated yourself, now all of a sudden I don't love the version of me that's showing up who's a bit dysregulated. And
Have to question it every day, and I have 3. All 3 of my kids are neurodivergent, and so it is a house of a lot of emotions here, and it's very rewarding in a way of the more I learn about myself, the more I can help my kids be more confident faster and hopefully avoid some of this burnout you and I have talked about today, hopefully at least be confident and enough, to be able to understand what works for their brain early on, you know? Me and the kids will go through zone 2 cardio if that's what required to for everybody to be thriving, I'm down for it.
yeah,
But I appreciate you saying that because it is a challenge. It's challenging enough to regulate ourselves, but you definitely can't regulate a child if you're not regulated. You
yeah,
can't pour from an
100%.
so,
So that's like
ex
the next part though of this exercise component. Because
keep
one
going.
of the things that I used to do was using exercise to shove every emotion down, wait until the endorphins kicked in to numb all of the pain that I was feeling. And so what's beautiful about exercise is that when you're the most overstimulated, when you're the most dysregulated, when you're feeling the biggest panic or mind numbing block because I'm supposed to be putting this presentation together, I feel so anxious about it. They're going to think I'm an idiot. Now that fear of appearing incompetent story is coming up,
Right.
adrenaline, cortisol, stress, but I'm stuck. And so the beauty of exercise is that I can actually recreate to a 10 out of 10 the cortisol, the blood pressure, the heart rate that's going to come up when I'm about to step on stage and present my ideas about ADHD to a room full of ADHD people who are judging whether I'm saying it perfectly right and a bunch of autistic people who are like, actually, this is in
Yeah.
all of that rumination and catastrophizing that's happening.
I
I can
agree,
Exactly.
Ian. Your
These are my
medical
certifications. But the beauty of that is I can actually recreate and practice those moments of the most dysregulation when when it's a 10 out of 10, and then practice calming my nervous system, and then practice my meditations, and then practice my down regulating breathing, my box breathing, my deficit breaths, my controlled diaphragmatic breathing. You and I could do some breath work right now. Great. Let's do some meditation. Let's do some mindfulness. And you're like, Ian, I'm feeling stress at like a 2 out of 10 right now. Like, yeah, you're intimidating, but not that intimidating. So, like, great. I practice getting my nervous system from a 3 down to like a 1.5. That actually
Yeah.
doesn't teach your nervous system anything. We have to exaggerate that feeling, that visceral experience of, oh my gosh, they're judging me. I can't believe I said that thing wrong. Now I'm stuck. Now I'm staring at my slides being like, oh, they think I'm an idiot. They think I'm an idiot. Practice this 100 times now, 1,000 times now, of that fear of appearing incompetent story when my nervous system's at a 10 out of 10. It's a controlled 10 out of 10. I'm
Yeah.
safe. I'm controlling this exercise, so I know that I'm safe. This is just a ski erg. This is not public shame and disgrace.
Right.
But
Right.
now that my heart rate's at 175, I can practice calming it down to below 120 inside of 2
Love that.
minutes. That's the practice. So now I don't have
That
to hope that my nervous system shows up in the moments that it's
right.
supposed to.
Right.
I've already practiced this. Already rehearsed this 1,000.
Ah, that's so much. And, that is it makes so much sense because, especially when I was getting into entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is the biggest self-growth journey ever, okay? Ever. And so I had coaches that were like, "Write your affirmations this many times a day. Meditate this many times a day. Listen to this many hours of podcast per day." I was going all these and I'm like, I can't quiet my mind enough to write these affirmations. Can I just type them? Can I say them out loud? Or or like you said, just the meditating in general, I've always found was very hard for me. If I try to sit that long in that quiet, but I can absolutely see where after recreating this experience in the gym and really pushing yourself, pushing your body, and then practicing it, absolutely, I could see that. And then how it would help you in the future when you do get into a panic mode or you do start to feel that rejection, sensitivity, and you're like, the heart rate's going up and everything's going up. And even the self doubt going up, which often will make us just remove ourselves completely or ghost. I can't tell you how many times I've had a rough week and I'm just like, I'm out, and it's taken years for me to be like, no, if you can just push through this hard time, next time it won't be so easy for that to get to you. Or next time it won't be so easy for that rejection sensitivity to take over. But I love that. That's genius. So I know you obviously have been working with, people one on one. And I know we chatted a little bit before we started recording about, where your business is going. So can you tell us a little bit about how you help these high achievers and what you help them with? How do you plug into their life? How can they plug into you?
Yeah, so I think for any ADHD coach, the bottom line is I could share all this wisdom and knowledge with you, and your frontal lobe's going like, "Great, I already knew that." Very likely. Like I didn't just teach you box breathing. I didn't just
Yeah.
teach you deficit breathing, and you're like, "Mind blowing. I should meditate. Mind blowing. I should exercise." The bigger issue is how do I increase the likelihood that you actually have the follow through for the thing that you frontal lobe know. I'm tapping my frontal lobe brain. Yeah, logically I know this. How do I increase the likelihood that I do that? And so a good majority of my coaching is how can I help increase the likelihood that you actually have the follow through for the things that you say are important, that you say that matter. And so some of the ways that I do that when it comes to performance coaching, when it comes to executive performance coaching, because I was a sales rep, a good majority of my clients are sales reps. That's typically the people who are attracted to the work that I provide. But being able to increase the likelihood that they update their Salesforce, that they work on the quarterly business review report that they've been avoiding for weeks on end, the
Yes.
boring admin work that we would rather put our face to a frying pan than do. Which reminds me, I've got work to do. So yeah, I need to leave this right now. But then I'm going to stare at my laptop and not do it. All of those things. So I essentially provide services around body doubling and, being mindfulness practices, being able to help them with breath work in real time, help them with the strategies in real time to increase the likelihood they actually do it. And so what I'm launching July 1st, I'm calling this H2 Hallelujah, right? H2 being second half of the year in, Q1, Q2, H1, H2.
I like it.
is essentially making it to where there's a group coaching program where our focus is going to be, hey, what are the legitimate diet, exercise, and sleep routines, the practical ones, the ones that are tangible, not just, hey, eat well, but hey, here are the foods that are most likely causing your brain inflammation that's decreasing the blood flow to your frontal lobe and it's affecting your ADHD. Hey, here are the foods that you can start eating, and here's some practical ways to cook them that increase the likelihood that you actually enjoy them enough to want to cook them more consistently. Hey, here are the exercise practices, these simple fundamentals. Here are the simplest ones of them. So you could do this inside of 10 to 30 minutes a day. If you want to go further along, hey, here's the training programs where you can get Thor like triceps like I have. It'll take you 10 years, but here are the exercises. And then finally being able to say, and here's the recovery practices that you can develop. So you're actually getting good rest. Very shamelessly, humble brag, I posted 100 sleep score on my Apple Watch because of the consistent practices that I create for deep rest, for being able to downregulate all of the anxiety and stress and overwhelm of entrepreneurship, because it's
Yeah,
fun all the time
yeah, yeah.
in order to get that
And
real deep restorative rest.
that's so important for, it's focusing what I'm hearing is like the practical daily routine or habit that we have, to have that follow through. Like you help people discover what's going to work for them to actually utilize that on a daily basis. And I know you said you work a lot with sales reps, obviously. I definitely feel like that is a job that a lot of ADHD people are attracted to because it's chaotic and it's constantly moving. And there is an opportunity a lot of times, especially if you're commission pay, to see more, make more. And I will ask you, how do you work with them? Is there a certain time period that you work with people specifically? What or what type of time period do you see it usually takes for people to establish these flows regularly?
Yeah, so this current program that I'm doing is going to be a 6-month program. And part of the reason for that is in the first 2 to 3 months, it can feel like therapy because we need to do a bit of an audit to create some awareness around, hey, what are your biggest shutdowns? Hey, what scenarios do you feel numb, apathetic to the work, completely blocked? Hey, let's create some awareness around that. Let's all develop some language for I'm blocked to this task. Here's what's happening in my nervous system. Here's where I feel this in my temples or my furrowed brow or this like pit in my stomach. Or for me, this like pressure to perform that I feel in my traps. Here's where I feel it in my body viscerally. But then also, hey, here's the story that I'm telling myself. Hey, here's
Right.
here's the self-criticism that's coming up for me. How do we develop some rituals and practice for noticing it, giving it language, giving context to our hippocampus so it knows to signal to our amygdala, hey, there's no lions, tigers, and bears in front of you. Like, go ahead and shut the alarm bells off. And then
Yeah,
in real time, hey, here's the breath work that actually calms the heart rate and the amygdala so that you can take more effective action. That
I
might
love
take
that.
2 to 3 months to develop some of those practices and habits where somebody's just like, oh, hey, I logically know how these things work, but now my nervous system gets it and I'm putting it into practice. And now I'm seeing real fruit of that. So the first 3 months is kind of like building the mechanics of your squat
Yeah,
versus like, hey, now the second 3 months of like, let's build real velocity. How can we do more in less time? So yeah, great. You're hitting 150% of quota, but it's taking you 12 hours a day.
yeah,
What would it be like if we could hit 140% of quota, but in 6?
right.
Hey, what if you could shut off every single day at 4 o'clock and be present with your family for 3 or 4 hours every day and have deep, meaningful, restorative rest?
Yeah,
Those are the things where it's like, hey, what would it be like if you didn't have to spend 2 or 3 hours waiting to do a task that's going to take you 10 minutes to complete
yeah,
because you're ruminating and spiraling about the fact that the task reminds you that you hate your job?
yeah. Oh, powerful. I hope everyone listened to that and really heard that because we talk a lot about obviously avoiding a certain task and then 11:59 hits and dopamine, and deadline comes in because you said you were going to do it today and then all of a sudden it takes you 1 minute. Like we talk a lot about that, but I hope you really heard what Ian just said. That task reminds you of something. There's an emotion tied to it, which is why you have been avoiding it. It reminds you of either failure or you hate your job or something you're avoiding, and so I love that you said the first 3 months you really focus on that awareness. And it's crazy because ADHD brains are usually so good at pattern recognition, except recognizing our own patterns. And when you do start to notice your own patterns, whether it be how you operate on a daily basis or patterns in relationships or patterns with addiction or whatever the patterns are, we, for some reason, can't see our own patterns. And usually that's because we're creating them to avoid something, to our brain thinks it's protecting it somehow, protecting us somehow, always. And that's wild because I talk a lot about pattern recognition. I was called out as a child and still as an adult very often for calling out patterns because people often don't like to address their own patterns. But I know I have my own that I am blind to, whether it be, leaving a coffee mug on my desk every day. Like, why can't I just take it with me and bring it to the sink? My husband reminds me very often, but I just didn't think about it. So I love that because I think driving awareness and us really becoming aware of our patterns and our behaviors and why we feel the way we feel, why we operate the way we operate, you can't overcome that or create systems to overcome that or to help you move forward in your job or your life, whatever it might be, until you know those patterns. That's the only way to build a custom plan for your own life because no two ADHD people are the same.
I love that call out because there's a couple things happening and some mantras that I love to use. Like I've simplified this that as soon as I notice one of my patterns, I immediately go into gratitude. And it's silly because people are like, you should be grateful and you should think positive. Hey, you can't think like that. And that's just
Yeah.
more of our amygdala coming down on us versus, hey, thanks, brain, for trying to keep me safe. Hey, thanks, brain, for trying to keep me stimulated. Oh, okay. What's needed right now of my nervous system? Hey, I'm going to go for a walk and walk through as many doorways as I can. Because how many times have I walked into a room and forgotten why I was there? So I'm going to walk through as many rooms as I
Okay.
can through this. Or for that
Okay.
matter, of even just like, hey, being grateful for the fact your brain is trying to keep you safe or your brain
Yeah.
is trying to keep you stimulated. And for me, my
Yeah.
whole business runs on LinkedIn. And so I'll notice one of my cues is I have LinkedIn up on my computer and then I still pulled LinkedIn up on my phone and I call it the double tap.
Okay.
Oh, notice the double tap because I literally have LinkedIn open on my like number one tab and yet I still opened up LinkedIn on my phone. Like that's obviously a pretty significant indicator of some dysregulation that's happening, some avoidance
Yeah.
that's happening, some anxiety that's happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, brain, for trying to keep me stimulated. What's important right now? Where am I
I love
feeling
that.
this? And the beauty of that process, though, is that once you've rehearsed it 1,000 times over, I don't actually feel shame over the fact that my brain was trying to stimulate me. The average person would go, oh, you're such an idiot. You're always going to be like this. Like, you're never going to be able to achieve X, Y, and Z thing. And then stress, overwhelm, pressure, anxiety, cortisol is all driving the ship. And yeah, inevitably, that fear of appearing incompetent, we don't have enough energy to maintain appearances.
Yeah.
We don't have
I
enough energy because our thyroid's like, hey, I'm not processing any more cortisol. Like, that's on you.
yeah,
So we're
and
just tired and beat up.
I love that you said you have mantras for that because speaking it out loud is obviously driving awareness to it, to your brain. You've already become aware of it, which cued the mantra, but retraining and rewiring, into positivity versus, like you said, going into cortisol spiral. So tell, because I know we're kind of coming up on time. I don't want to push your day back too far, but tell me. Obviously, you said that you are very active on LinkedIn, so people can connect with you on LinkedIn, right?
Correct.
How
Yes.
can they find out a little bit more about your programs and, just you helping them move forward in their journey with ADHD? Because I know I have got a slew of high performing, quietly suffering professionals in my audience that, would absolutely love to connect with you and hear more about what you do.
Yeah. So, number one place that I post for social media is on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. My website is ianmay, that's mai.co. I also actually just released a free school community where I've put together, it's not ADHD 101, it's actually more of ADHD performance 101. How do we turn on hyperfocus at will? What are the mechanics from a nervous system standpoint to increase not just our hyperfocus, but hyper learning? How do we
Yeah.
recover from performance? All of that's actually in my free curriculum on school,
Perfect.
but great. Your frontal lobe knows how to do all the things. How do we increase the likelihood that you actually use those? So that group coaching starting July 1st, we will be focused on all the ways to fuel performance. You get group coaching sessions for 6 months. We'll essentially be doing body doubling sessions. I do 3 a week. So it's an hour and a half per session. So
Great.
taking all of those boring admin tasks that you're avoiding, we get them done together. We crank it out. We put on our focus headphones. I have my lighting set up that it's all dark so I can't see anything outside of this window of my screen. I've got my snacks, I've got my energy drinks, I've got all of my notifications. So we
Love
get things
that.
done together. And we celebrate taking messy action. We help each other remove some ambiguity because, hey, my boring admin work is grow the business, and that's too nebulous for me to take real effective action on.
Yeah.
All of that's in the group coaching cohort. I'm on top of that. If you feel like you need some more one on one attention, or you need some of my insight from 12 years of consulting for Fortune 50 companies and startups, because of the fact that I worked with engineering leaders on process operations and development, now I'm just working with the software of the mind. So if you feel like you need a little bit more attention, that's in the executive one-on-one coaching. Starts July 1st for that 6-month coaching kickoff. Anybody who is wanting to sign up ahead of that, I'm offering the full month of June for free, included with that program.
Nice. And we will make sure that we have that linked all in the show notes for everyone to check out because I mean, you obviously have, like you said, a rap sheet of accolades and experience, but I just love your methodology and obviously proven records here because I mean you have been through a massive transformation yourself. I've read the testimonials on your website. It's just a very different way of approaching our AD. It's a holistic way, right? And not holistic in, anything woo woo or crazy, but in the idea of like it's a full body experience because even though it's a brain, it's a neurological difference. It affects our entire body, which affects our entire life and our relationships and how we operate. And I love that you are approaching more than just one area of that and getting down to the root cause of maybe some of these symptoms. It's very easy for us to say, oh, that's just my ADHD, or that's how it's always going to be. And next thing you know, we're doing patterns that we don't want to be doing, like addiction or, avoidance or toxic, whatever they're calling it on Twitter these days, dopamine, toxic dopamine, whatever, or ruining a relationship, and I have seen all of these things. And like I said, in my life, from clients I've worked with or I've heard that they've struggled with these things. I've struggled with a lot of them myself. And so I appreciate that you are bringing just a full nervous system, body overhaul for our high achievers because it's needed, So much of our high achieving wears us down to that burnout, and any way that we can avoid that is a must. So
100%.
you being here with me today. I will ask you, this is the last question. If you could give one piece of advice to that high achiever out there right now, maybe they're in the pit of where you were in 2020 and they hear this episode and they're like, well, this all sounds great, but I mean, I've tried that. I exercise 4 times a week and I eat, exactly what Macro Stacks app tells me to eat. And they got all the things. They've tried all the things. Air quotes for those of you that may be listening and not watching. Air quotes. What would you tell that person? Because 'Cause they're already doubting it, so
The only way for you to experience real breakthrough is to create some awareness around the emotion that you're avoiding. And when you feel that emotion 100 out of 10, you no longer feel afraid of it. And therefore, you no longer feel like you have to escape it.
I love it. That's it, y'all. We're gonna end on that because that's awesome. Well, Ian, thank you for being with me today. I appreciate you so much. I could talk to you for, like, an hour, but like I said, I struggle with time time blindness, and so I don't wanna capitalize your calendar, but I'm just grateful that you took time to be with us today. If you are listening to this episode, definitely make sure you check out the show notes. We'll have all of his information there for you to plug in to obviously get a special offer for free on his new coaching that's coming out. And then just to connect with him on LinkedIn and find out a little bit more in his free school community. So there's so many resources that you put out into the world. We're going to make sure everyone gets those. But until next time, guys, make it simple, make it social, and make it awesome.